Shin Megami Tensei If is not a good game. It lazily reuses a bunch of assets and music from previous SNES installments. The gameplay is repetitive, most of the characters are paper thin, and the domain of sloth might just actually be the single worst dungeon ever to be put in a video game. Really, other than somewhat laying the groundwork for the Persona series, there is very little of this game that's discussed positively nowadays, but that's not to say it's devoid of any qualities. The atmosphere is pretty strong, as per usual for the series. It reuses a lot of stuff from older games, yeah, but I mean, that stuff was good then, so at the end of the day, it is still good here. And while it does kinda suck that you can only go through it on a second playthrough, the Akira route is at the very least more enjoyable than the main campaign. However, among all of If's often pointed positives, I do feel that there is one which tends to not really get talked about much. That being the game's villain, Ideo Hazama. The popular consensus around Hazama seems to be that he's a pretty solid villain, but not much more than that. He's not a hated character, but he's far from a beloved one. This consensus is one which I've never really found myself agreeing with. I think that Hideo Hazama, while not particularly groundbreaking, is an incredibly strong antagonist. One which makes me look back at SMT If as a whole in a much warmer light compared to most Megaten fans. And in this video, I'd like to tell you just exactly why that is. I'll be looking at Hazama purely by how he's portrayed in If. Any other appearances in things like the prequel mobile game and spin-off manga will not be discussed here. This way we can keep the focus on his character as originally was. But without further ado, this is Hideo Hazama. When looking at Shin Megami Tensei villains, Hazama is already a bit of a standout. In a series full of characters who don't really fall into any particular good or evil spectrum, instead all mostly being personifications of extremist worldviews, in SMT If, Hazama is the one sole villain in all routes. I mean, I guess there's also Otsuki who kinda shows up from time to time, but really, he barely has any importance whatsoever. Kinda just being there to fuck with you because the game thinks it's funny. Hazama's position as someone who wants nothing more than the suffering of others may initially make him seem far less compelling than other villains such as Lucifer or YHVH, who both have far more complex and interesting goals in mind. However, I believe that with Hazama, Atlus was able to tackle some themes which none of those other villains were really ever able to touch upon. So let's begin by going over just what he's all about. As soon as the game begins, Hazama immediately walks up to the spotlight and declares himself as the Demon Emperor. Previously a normal high school student, a demonic ritual performed by him in the school's gym led to him gaining demonic power and becoming ruler of the Expanse. With this power, he is now planning to punish every student in his school for their misdeeds, sending them into different otherworldly domains themed after the 7 deadly sins where they will suffer for all eternity. Hazama is immediately shown as a narcissistic asshole who considers himself to be above humanity, a being somehow greater given the objective of punishing humanity for its folly. He's the sort of guy who most would generally just want to punch in the face right about now. Soon the entire school gets teleported to the Expanse, as Hazama begins unleashing his demons to wreak havoc and make the suffering of all students inside as great as possible. From here, as the self-insert player character, you are free to choose one of 4 partners to assist you in getting out of this predicament. Yumi, Charlie, Reiko or Akira. Akira's route being only available on New Game Plus is kind of the outlier here. In it, the both of you fall down a pit, Akira slowly gets fused with a demon named Demon, and you eventually climb to the top of the Tower of Confinement, where the party beats the Demon Emperor up, high-five each other, and then the game sorta ends on that anticlimactic note. Yeah, the storyline of Akira's route is really not much to write home about, especially where Hazama is concerned, so let's go back to the other 3. It is here where the vast majority of If's content is offered, as you and your partner make it through the various domains of sin, defeating their guardians and obtaining the plot-relevant rings themed after positive human traits, which allows him to further break the seals enforced by Hazama in plans of eventually escaping the hellhole. On their adventure, Hazama often makes his presence clear, scolding the party for their various sins and generally just enjoying seeing them being tortured as they slowly make their ways up to him. How the journey ends will mostly depend depend on what goals your partner has in mind. Yumi's kinda just there to save the school. So both of you kill the deity emperor and everything goes back to normal with only a few soon forgotten casualties left behind. Charlie then is mostly just an asshole who wants to get the fuck out of there. His route goes about a little differently, with Hazama ending up turning Charlie's friend Ryuichi along with his girlfriend Akiko into statues. But eventually the party makes it to Hazama, where after defeating him he congratulates them for their strength and lets them escape the expense, though warning them that soon enough he will have them killed anyway, so in the end nothing really matters. The school's disappearance is blamed on a gas leak explosion and Charlie lives to touch his balls in public yet another day. Yeah, this ending kinda sucks. But alright, now to finally get into the real meat of things, Reiko's ending. Now Reiko, despite not really being that deep a character, does have some sort of relation to Hazama, which is why she asks the protagonist to help her with getting to him, and so they eventually do just that, arriving at the Demon Emperor's room, where despite Reiko pleading that she just wants to talk to him, Hazama attacks her anyways, eventually leading to his defeat. However, unlike the other campaigns, this scenario doesn't end here. Reiko approaches Hazama, lamenting that she couldn't help him, as the Ring of Salvation carried by him flashes, teleporting the party into Hazama's soul, and it is here where we finally get to see who the deity emperor really is. At an early age, Hazama's parents were divorced, leading his mother and stepsister to leave him, with an empty hole still in his heart. Years later, Hazama would never be able to find love. No one loved him, and he didn't love anyone, as he developed a public reputation for just being a really weird, creepy guy that most students would want nothing to do with. If anything, he was often bullied. This eventually led to him breaking down in front of Kayama, the school doctor, who despite lamenting his sorrow, wasn't really in a position to help much. At one point, he did try his luck with giving Akiko a love letter, but only for her to reject him without even opening the envelope, leading to her and her friends laughing at him. These are all the shown events which led Hazama to performing the demonic ceremony at the school gym, in hopes of finally getting revenge on all of those who wronged him. Eventually, the group makes it into the Soul's Core, where they confront the game's true final boss, the Warped Mind. After his defeat, Hazama is left absolutely dumbstruck. He cannot accept the idea that a human was able to take him down, as he weeps about it, claiming that the protagonist has been picking on him and must be cheating. Hazama slowly reverts to his child form, only for Reiko, his long-lost sister, to come to him and finally embrace him, telling Hazama that everything will be alright and she will always be by his side, leading Hazama to ultimately calm down and realize the errors of his ways. Reiko doesn't expect anyone to forgive Hazama for his crimes, however, she is determined to stay by his side, so that his mind may never be twisted again. Afterwards, the school returned to the human world and Reiko and Hazama were never seen again, ending SMT if. Now, if you're acquainted with the Megaton series and have somehow not played If, then a lot of this might sound sorta familiar. A high school student summons demons to get revenge on his bullies, which ends up leading into a giant mess. You can't fool me, Atlus, that's the same backstory of Akemi freaking Nakajima. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Nakajima. He is like the funniest character ever to be constructed by man. However, as much as I hate to say it, when looking at it without taking the funnies into account, yeah, Nakajima kinda sucks. He's made up to be an unlikable asshole only to then play the part of the hero for the majority of his digital devil story. Really, giving that backdrop to the villain rather than the hero makes a lot more sense. And it also helps that in terms of being a well-realized character, Hazama has a lot more going to him than Nakajima. One of the strengths of the Megami Tensei games, particularly the earlier entries, was their ability to use subtext in order to convey their themes. For JRPGs, the games are usually a bit lighter on the cutscene front, and that is because in order to truly appreciate their stories, you need to really dig deeper into just what these games are trying to tell, which often leads into differing interpretations. Now, some might say that being unclear on some things is a sign of poor writing, but really, it's just what makes them deeper as pieces of art. Just like how no two people will interpret the meaning of a painting the same way, way. The same could be said about how we view these stories. The main difference SMT If offers is that instead of focusing on wider issues relating to society as a whole, it puts most of its focus into this single person, depicting just how a miserable high school student would see himself become the king of demons. The bits and pieces we see of Hazama's past are just that, pieces. A lot of what led Hazama to where he is now is really something the game leaves up to your interpretation, so what I am about to say now isn't really something definitive, something the writers clearly had in mind when making this game. These are just the pieces I choose to use when filling in this puzzle. It should come as no surprise that Hazama likely had family issues, with his mother abandoning him at a young age, leaving him with potentially only a father at best. And seeing as he claims that his life is lacking in love, it can be surmised that none of his family relationships are positive in any way. I personally interpret Hazama as someone whose biggest issue was the lack of any real guiding hand. Without anyone to show him the ways of the world in a loving manner, all he was left to do was stagnate with his own thoughts. As life kept going and asking more and more of him, he wasn't able to keep up with it. While he does seem to be intelligent where grades are concerned, when it comes to social skills, he has little to no experience. He has gathered knowledge but never truly learned to be human. Hazama is a child trapped in the body of a teen, unable to make do in the cruel, forgiving world that he lives in. Lost within a web of people he just isn't able to understand. However, instead of doubting that he may be the issue, he saw people as a whole as monsters. His loneliness eventually leading into him taking interest in the occult, as an evil desire within him slowly sprang up, eventually leading into his terrible plan which caused the suffering of so many. When people see 5 individuals in a group act a certain way, most would likely assume, perhaps not even consciously, that the others in the group share the same traits. It's the main reason internet fandoms are looked at in such a poor light. The worst people are always the ones everybody is most vocal about. In this day and age of 2023, Twitter is often said to be filled with nothing but toxic assholes. However, when you take into account that over 400 million people use Twitter, the vision sorta starts to blur. The way Hazama sees it, because everyone in his school is terrible towards him, then that must mean that they are also terrible people, and ergo, humanity itself is terrible. With him also seeing himself as somehow above them, clear of all of the sins he also despises them for. However, what Hazama doesn't realize is that he is also among the humans he loathes so much, and as such, he shares their failings. He is extremely prideful of his intellect, he is greedy, never being satisfied with the people's worship of him. He lusts for Akiko's love, envies his schoolmates who live with love. He gluttons for the students' punishment, fueled by his endless wrath for them. And worst of all, he is too slothful to realize all of that. Hazama is a deeply flawed individual. He may have lied to himself that he is somehow greater than humanity, but really what he is unable to see is that he isn't above humanity. If anything, he's below it. Lacking in humanity's positive traits such as modesty, diligence, generosity, instead being all too consumed by man's greedy desires to see himself as the monster he has become. He lacks the love which drives humanity forward in spite all of its misdoings. However, despite it all, at the end of the day, he is still a human at the core. His heart may have gotten engulfed in darkness, but at the end of the day, it is still a heart of man. I think it's telling that despite all of the atrocities he committed, Hazama has still never directed his rage towards Kayama, the one person in the entire school to show pity towards him. Regardless of everything he has proclaimed and done as the Demon Emperor, he still deeply cherished the one and only love he has ever been given, for as insignificant as it was. Hazama is telling himself that he is the Demon Emperor, telling himself that he is this great omnipotent being, but deep down he knows it's all just a delusion. Hazama is just a sad lost kid, unable to find a reason to keep living, with no one there to help him as he is lost in the darkness. When it comes to selling just what kind of person Hazama really is on the inside, I think there is no place better to look than SMT If's official artwork by Kazuma Kaneko. Most illustrations of Hazama depict him as a smug, self-righteous bastard, sitting on top of the throne of humanity's twisted desires, powers. This is very much akin to how the game presents him during most of the runtime. But then we have the one piece of art that breaks that trend, the game's PS1 cover. While most of Kaneko's art relishes in its insane attention to detail, this piece instead embraces its eerie simplicity, and it is easily one of my favorite video game covers ever. The imagery of the pained Hazama kneeling in the spotlight, surrounded by the creeping darkness with the demonic emperor and Siri staple pentagram around him beckoning him from the shadows, telling his heart that he is somehow chosen for greatness, his pain being the signifier that he belongs above humanity. It is all absolutely brilliant. Speaking of the deity emperor, I think it's pretty fitting that his design is akin to a dark reflection of the Statue of Liberty, as he believes humanity has lost the right to liberty, deserving nothing but subjugation. His warped mind form then bears a resemblance to a demonic fetus, representing the evil that has slowly been growing inside him, as well as his infantile way of thinking. It does kinda suck that Reiko isn't really that interesting though. She supposedly just happened to be in the same school as Hazama, and didn't realize that until he already became the deity emperor. I think it would have been slightly more clean if they just established that Reiko was simply too preoccupied to notice the pain her brother was going through, leading into her feeling more remorseful for not helping him sooner. Regardless of that though, I do still really like the note Hazama's story ends on, with him finally learning that in the end of the day, there will always be humans who care about you. Humanity isn't all bad. The rings the party has collected throughout their journey is proof of that. And in the end of the day, Hazama isn't the only one who can learn something from this tragedy. If he was simply shown a single helping hand, all of this misery could have been completely avoided. You may not think it to be the case, but your actions helping others can have an incredibly important impact on them. It is this lesson which Hazama's tale imparts on us. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and more importantly, don't be afraid to offer help. While bad may always exist, there will also still be good out there. Things don't need to end in misery. As long as we all still have a heart, everything will be alright. At the end of the day though, Hazama is still very much a bad guy whose actions ended up causing the deaths of many. The fates of him and Reiko are left up to your interpretation, so whether they die together in the expanse or manage to escape and turn over a new leaf, that is up for the players to decide. If Hazama is truly worthy of lament, liberty, subjugation, or damnation. Ideo Hazama's character is nothing groundbreaking really. However, I still think he stands as the bright shining spotlight in the otherwise heavily flawed experience that is SMT If. Persona 1 would come out a few years after If's release, and while most seem content with crediting If for inspiring Persona 1's school setting, Hazama's character was also likely a driving force behind a lot of Persona's thematic psychology, particularly with the character of Maki Sonomura, who in many ways tackles a lot of similar issues. The Persona series as we know it may have been completely different if it wasn't for Atlus being so bold with Hazama's character, so even if you don't really like Hazama as executed in the game, I think it does still deserve some credit for really being the first character in Megaten to get as much fleshing out as he did as an individual, beyond just the views he has on the world as a whole. By the time most players get to see Hazama fleshed out, they're likely already sick of the game and just want to get it done with and move on, which I think is the main reason Hazama's character often ends up falling by the wayside. For as crazy as it may sound though, in some ways, if being such a chore to get through actually somewhat enhances Hazama's character. Remember, he's doing this to torture the students, not give them some fun adventure to go through. In playing SMT If, you are forced to go through the pain which Hazama has endured for so long, trials themed after the sins of humanity which tortured him so. If by the time you get to him, you have already sworn your hatred upon the game, upon him, then that truly means that you have witnessed witnessed the pain of Hazama firsthand, and only by forgiveness can said pain truly end. Now please don't get me wrong, in absolutely no way does this justify the game simply not being good. This is more so just me having a bit of fun with the way I look at art. You could just as easily argue that everything I've said in this video is complete baloney, and Hazama's character was just thrown together in an afternoon like a week before the game shipped. If you wanna be pessimistic about things, then I won't get in your way, but I just hope I was able to show you why despite everything If may do wrong, I still find myself looking back at it with a soft smile. The game wasn't really given much time in the oven, leaving a lot of it half cooked. However, the core of it all was still made with love by a human heart, and that is something I can always appreciate. Thank you all so much for watching, and please have a good one.